Hello, my friends. How are you? Man, the Discord has become this really beautiful place. There's like 550, 600 people on there. I'm now learning way more than I'm giving to it. So I encourage all of you guys to go check that out. We'll get Jon on here in a second. What's up, everybody? What's going on? What's good? Yeah, it's been a crazy last 48 hours or so. I've been working like crazy here in New York. I saw Baines the other night, who was in town for the Thug SNL stuff, and had a great session yesterday. I've been working like nonstop the last 48 hours after computer breaking and then getting sick. I'm finally back to full health. So just been going crazy on it. What up? How's everybody doing? Let's see. Let Jon get on here in a second. If you guys haven't gone on to the YouTube, please go there and subscribe and comment and give us all the love over there. And, you can search the YouTube clips channel for things that we've talked about. If you got questions, we're now covering, we've covered a lot of things. So there's like 200 and something videos on there. We're going to be having a lot more coming up soon. And also now on the website on LiveWithMattRad.com, where Bradley has been taking amazing show notes every week. You can actually search on there as well. So if you go to LiveWithMattRad.com and just search, I think maybe click on episodes and then search, you can search through the show notes. So we're basically trying to build a resource of all these conversations we're having. So again, YouTube clips channel is great. The Discord is great. And LiveWithMattRad.com, you can search through the show notes, which are extensive links and everything. All right, I'm going to grab Jon. I can hear you.
Can you see me?
Hey, there he is.
Hey,
how are you? Oh, and I was going to say, people on there, the Live with Matt Rad Instagram, which has the clips, has the Discord link in it, so you can go there and join. Yeah, the community's been great, man. Now we have this, like, we're sort of building this knowledge base. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. How are you doing, man? I think who's got the better beard? Your beard is pretty good.
I don't know.
So good.
Your whole look is tight right now. The length of the top to the bottom is really good.
Yeah, I'm just letting it go. Just shaved everything and then just letting it go.
Start it over again.
See what happens. How you been, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I'm a bit tired. I haven't eaten. I'm on like 20 hours of a fast, so I'm a little low energy today after tennis. So for those of you wondering, I'm a little bit tired, but I'll do my best today. Well, I didn't have time to eat before this, and usually after tennis before this I eat, but I didn't today. So I'm a little low energy. Yeah.
Fasting can be great for focus and like mental clarity, but if you then go play a bunch of tennis, your body definitely needs something to burn. So
yeah, and today was a pretty hard, like long set match with Nathaniel and I. So I came out victorious, though, for those that care to know.
I like that you say that every time, because I think you win every time, don't you?
I win most times. Yeah. But I'm good.
That's fantastic. And well, actually, you want to jump into a question right away? There's a bunch of good questions today, but there was one that I know is going to bring both of us joy. Jan asked, have you found any good, healthy studio foods for long sessions? It's a question we have not been asked before, and given how much we talk about food, that's a really great one. I know that there's a lot of studios that will give you the sort of like business meeting Hollywood food trays, which is just basically sugar. I don't really do any of that stuff. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff I think for what to eat in the studio for snacks is in line with all the other sort of contemporary health stuff out there, which is if you eat a bunch of sugar, you're going to have crashes. It's not going to be good for you, all that kind of stuff. I tend to like things like cashews and, and nuts and things with a little bit of fat, a little bit of calories. I love taking little snack breaks in the studio. I think it's also just like an emotional bonding thing with people you're working with. But do you have go-to snacks that aren't like proper meals?
I do. I'm not really a snacker. I can usually hang, like I'll do eggs and maybe some smoked salmon or something like for breakfast. And then I'll do a big dinner. It's kind of my normal vibe. But if I am hungry, and this is all, diet dependent. Some people are plant-based, some people are omnivores, some people are carnivores, like whatever. I'm into canned fish. for omega-3s, right? Like I'll just pop open a can of sardines or smoked mussels I really like, or anchovies, and that's kind of my midday, honestly. That mixed with some cashews or walnuts or a handful of some sort of nut, pistachios, I think are my favorite nuts. What else? Like even just taking cucumbers and some feta cheese and some herbs and olive oil, you know, pretty low caloric snacks, because I don't want to, you know, if you think about putting food in your body, it's energy, and then it takes other energy to process that food. So depending on how much you eat, you can get tired. So there's a threshold. Like you'll notice after eating a big dinner, you're tired. Like that whole Thanksgiving food coma thing is not because of tryptophan in turkey. That's a big.
It's because you ate too much food.
It's just you ate too much in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So when I think about snacks when needed, which I only snack maybe 2-3 times a week, if that, I do pretty low caloric things. Like
that makes sense. Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, your role as a mixer, you're not doing as many. It was interesting. And big shout out Baines, who was in town. I mentioned at the beginning, but saw him. He was out for SNL because Young Thug was doing that, and then he was in the studio on Sunday, and I went to go hang out with him. And
I heard you.
Met your boy T-Shine and
T-Shine. Yeah.
And hung out there. It was a great crew. You know, just met a few guys there, and it was a lot of fun. And but it's interesting to be like, you know, he invited me over to just say what's up. They went to the studio at, I don't know, 11 at night or something, because that's their schedule, 11 to 6 a.m. or some insane shit like that. And so I went there, and he was in the middle of tracking, and I'd never, you know, become friends with Baines, hung with him. We've talked on these lives, but it is great to go see someone who's at that level doing the job that they do. I mean, obviously he's an amazing mix engineer, but doing the tracking stuff as well, where he was just in there, just on the Pro Tools, just boom, boom, boom. He had the studio assistant was doing playlists and showing him stuff, and like making sure he's getting water and getting this thing, and just like keeping that momentum. And it made me think a lot about the wide spectrum of roles that we play, where there's a lot of times where I'm like, for the rest of the day today, I'm just going to hang out here, work on a few things at my pace. When I feel hungry, I'm going to walk down the street, get a little falafel sandwich, take as long a break as I need, might smoke a joint later and play some guitar on a couple of ideas, make some tracks, you know, hanging out at the studio this weekend. There's more people that want tracks. So I might make some stuff. I got some productions to finish, completely on my pace. But other days I might be in the studio with an artist, and if they're catching a momentum, it doesn't matter how hungry I am or how whatever, it's like I'm staying in there. I'm on their schedule, and it's extremely important to stay completely focused on what they're doing, because the job is to capture the momentum that's happening. And so that is a very wide spectrum to have to try to find a good diet and balance and all of that. So I think, you know, it's great to have, you know, somebody said on the chat there, meal prep. I think that's a good idea. And whether it's you're literally making your meals for the week, which is great and economical if you can do things like that. But having like, my favorite thing in the studio is, I think it's Kirkland or one of the brands has unsalted cashews. You just get big old tubs of those. Yeah. You can snack on those very
I would
easy,
get the
simple.
Salted ones, because electrolyte levels are important for times like that too. So I wouldn't even do the unsalted. That's when you would want the salt. Have that in a glass of water, you're probably going to be okay. You know, I'm thinking like my answer is very specific to things you can pack and bring to the studio. Like canned fish come in boxes. They're canned. You can bring them with you. And then any studio has a bowl that you can put them in, add some salt and pepper, because every studio has it, right? Like, you know, meal prep is important, but snack prep is really important. And you can do that for the whole week. Like, I mean, it seems like, you know, when you're ordering food I always talk about this, the impetus to even starting my conversation you know, pre-pandemic events was, on a good day, y'all get ordered sugarfish. Like, that's a good day. And that's still like a ton of rice, and you're running off carbs, and you're going to crash after 3 hours. Like, you actually want, during the day, you want more protein-based foods and fat-based foods. You actually don't really want to have a lot of carbs during the day. If you, you know, new research is saying that you know, carbs at night, at least 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep, is when you'd want to eat them, because your body's going to feel tired after burning off the carbs and actually put you to a proper sleep. Now, if you're in the studio thinking about the people that are booking 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. sessions, you don't want carbs. You're going to fall asleep. That energy is going to run out in 3 hours. You actually want high protein foods later on, will keep you energized. You want electrolytes. You want salt. that's when you'd want those things if you're planning on staying up. So, I mean, I would do research on this. I mean, we can talk about this as well as we can, but there are people that talk about this for their profession. You know,
I love it. Iggy just said they're talking about food when John's fasting.
I'm okay with it. Like I planned it. Like I wasn't, you know, I knew I had to get notes done. Like my day is not like your day today. My day is after this, I have a live stream to wrap something up. Then I have a 3-hour call with some Grammy board thing. And then I have a dinner, and then I probably have to come back and work after that. So my day is not very leisurely. So the food thing, like I'm going to whip up a soft scramble really fast after this. Like I have the ingredients already mise en place in front of my face.
Love it.
But I was stoked about this. I missed you last week. I know we jumped into a question, but I'm glad you're feeling well. You look great.
Thank you.
Big bummer that happened to you, but you know,
I caught the COVID. That's
caught it.
Know, it and double vax, so I got over it quickly, and but I was definitely lost the sense of smell, which is very surreal. And I know a lot of people had it a lot worse than me, so you know, I'm thankful that had a place to stay, place to quarantine, wasn't bothering anybody. Nobody around me seemed to get it, so I don't know where I got it, but you know, been on the subway and been out at restaurants. I'm gonna wear masks and things, but this is, you know, why I'm thankful, not to get into a political discussion, but I'm thankful for modern medical science. I'm going to get my vaccine. I will probably get a booster at some point. Although right now I think I have about all the immunity you could possibly have. That I'm double Moderna, and I just had what I assume is the Delta variant, since that's everything. So I'm basically invincible right now, if anybody wants to hang out. Which is why I've been back at it. The last 48 hours have been, I said it, maybe, I don't know if I exactly said it on my Instagram the last day or two, but it's been the most intense and productive and fulfilling 48 hours of creativity that I've had in years. I mean, the pandemic made things super weird where I can't like run around from studio to studio, but that's basically what I've done the last few days. I've finished a bunch of records. Everybody seems very happy with the work too. I've been really happy with it. Been writing, been finishing productions, been doing all kinds of stuff. So it feels good to be making things. And, you know, it's one of those things that I know it logically, like so many things we know logically. Like I know, you know, like if you're not meditating, like I know that I'd feel better if I just sat down and meditated or went and did my exercise, but it's hard to emotionally understand it until you're doing it, physically understand it. And just being in the studio with a whole bunch of people, making a bunch of stuff, I feel amazing. I'm super happy. This is like the thing that fulfills me in life more than anything else. So it's really great to be back, especially computer broke. And then right when my computer, it was when we did our last live, I was like feeling a little bit iffy that day. And then the next day I kind of felt sick, and then I lost my sense. It's basically like computer's gone for 2 weeks. Then the day it's finally loaded up and back, I start feeling sick. So it's been like a month of this nomadic thing and hanging out in New York. And I finally am like in the mode, as I say, and it fucking
Let's keep it up. Man. Let's keep it up.
Let's keep it up.
So what do we got?
Lots of good questions. There's one question that we could answer quickly, or we could spend like 5 lives doing. And I like this question because it gives us the freedom to kind of talk about whatever we want. Avaya asked, what's generally the most challenging instrument or thing to mix in a song? And I don't know that there's one. Things are challenging for different reasons. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been, again, going between I'm working on like 7 or 8 projects at once. So some of it's like finishing touches production. Some of it is writing from scratch. Some of it is sort of executive production and giving thoughts and critiques on other people's production. And so I've been hearing lots of different kinds of music, lots of different skill levels of engineering and tracking, and finding challenges and interesting challenges in all kinds of different instruments. The most recent one is, for whatever reason, live bass. I had live bass on a few different songs, and I find that to be an instrument that is challenging to mix and get right, mostly because there aren't people who really know how to record it very well. I mean, obviously there's amazing bass players, but oftentimes when I get live bass that's actually played, it's one of the instruments that is the most unruly and most uneven. So I've been finding that one in particular to be challenging. And I always find that, like, you know, there's a mismatch between the subharmonics and the like octave or two above it. So it's like you'll have the like 50 cycles super low end and then like more like the 200 a couple octaves up, and some notes people play it and the 200 will pop out, and some notes you'll have the sub pop out. And so figuring out how to use a little bit of saturation, multi-band compression, like whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, so thinking, let's take that one and run with it for a second. I feel that too. I'm actually mixing a jazz album right now.
Upright bass or
upright bass.
Extra hard.
Extra hard. And it's not my forte. So, and I love jazz, and I'm actually so thrilled to be on it. The A&R and I are getting close on projects, and I'm really stoked to be involved in this classic sounding record. But her first note was like, way too much sub in the bass. Like, jazz records have more definition, and this, like, oh yeah, as a fan, like I understand that.
Trying to make it sound like Khalid and shit.
Well, I did. I tried to make like R&B subby version of a jazz record. It's not what she wanted, right?
By the way, can you send me that mix? I'd be interested in hearing that.
The version of
like a subby jazz mix.
After the I will. After the note, it's so much better now. It's obviously like the right version. So I'm not even excited about that version anymore. But I can actually show you both. So anyway, so when I think about that, imagine a bass amp. You're talking about a live bass. Let's talk about that, and then we'll come to an upright bass. The live bass, you're playing through an amp, and what are you doing when you're dialing in the gain of the bass amp? You're trying to get some sustain. DI is different. DI takes a certain type of playing. I think playing on a DI bass only is very different than like a bass amped bass performance. So you're going to lean into it. You're going to saturate it. You're going to turn the gain up. You're going to turn the volume up. You're going to turn the low end up. Like, you're figuring out your tone, and what you're trying to figure out is the sustain. You're trying to figure out harmonic sustain in how you play it, right? So if someone's playing it loosely because they didn't play through an Ampeg, like some B15 or an SVT or something. Which
again, those things are adding harmonic. Which we talk about saturation a lot of the time. They're going through an amplifier. So reverse engineer that after the fact. If you're in the mix process, which would be like figure out your own version of the saturation. Like, are you using Saturn? Are you using Spectre? Are you using an exciter multi-band? Like, where are you trying to saturate that to hold up? Because we're looking for sustain. We're looking for the feel of the actual performance, which comes through saturation and compression, which, we can talk about how many ways to compress a bass. Yeah. But I would think about saturation, and then you might have to split out the performance into different notes, higher octaves, sometimes even on an 808 on a sub bass. We need to split out higher octaves sometimes on these things. But I would reach for saturation first and go all the way with it. I actually was experimenting with something recently on a live bass that I wound up sharing with my one of my best friends, Tyler Johnson, producer. And he actually took it and ran with it. He's been using it all the time and said it works, which is nice when someone else can make your idea work, which is I'll take frequencies I don't actually tend to like in a live bass, which is like that 80 to 100 area, which I take, for example, I take out of an upright bass to expose. That always gets in the way of the vocal to me.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you take that on Spectre, I'm actually going to give this is actually like a technique to try. Yeah. Take Spectre, turn up from 100, whatever it is, below, pretty high into a limiter. Limit that boosted frequency and dial in the proper sustain you're looking for of that. It might be woofy, and it might be a bit too much low end, but you're going to get that saturation and that control and that sustain like a bass amp would do. And then after the limiter, now carve out some of that extra low end that you don't want. Maybe that's around 120 because of a phase bump or something, but you're actually dialing the sustain as if the bass is recorded, compressed, and through an amp, and then EQing after the fact. And that's really, because it's like, what I'm trying to say overall is what would the sound have sounded like if it was recorded properly? It's going to have more sustain. It's going to have more low end. It's going to sound like a real bass. And a lot of times what you're referring to as hard to mix live bass is not a properly recorded bass with the proper sustain, the proper performance. So let's make it and then say that was the raw stem. Commit all those things if you don't even want to look at it, because you might not want to tweak it after. That's the new bass. Now it needs to be EQ'd and sculpted. It's just gonna be too much 100 or something. But you need to get that roundness first and that sustain first.
This is one of the reasons. That's a great answer, by the way. It's going to be very helpful to people and helpful to me. I'm going to try all these things. Again, you know, one of the reasons we like talking about high level things, and like I think it was somewhere around the 8th. I think it was episode 8 of the 60 plus that we've done now, where we just talked about harmonics and saturation, understanding how these instruments work, especially in an era where everybody's starting on laptops and making things on computers and getting sampled sounds. It's still, I think, very important for those that really want to dig into the production and mixing and all of that to really pause for a second. I'm running out of battery. To really learn how these sounds are created in the real world and understand, even if you don't become an amazing bass player, understanding the frequency range of a bass guitar. A low E is something like 43 hertz, low 40s hertz. But what is it like when it's a low B? And where's a low C in hip hop for that great low 808 sound? And how the overtone series works once you start using saturation, and what it means to put a bass through an amp and a tube amp, and why tubes add harmonic saturation and what that means and how that changes the frequency response and how it compresses the dynamic range. These are all fundamental concepts that apply pretty much across the board to all kinds of instruments. And when you talk about challenging instruments, which is why I love this question. I mean, again, we could do what we just did there on almost any instrument.
I was about to say, like, this applies. Basically, like, the concept is figure out the sustain and the performance of the song by overdoing things and see what's there to work with. And then after the fact, then you can do more reductive, subtractive processing. It's a little bit counterintuitive because when something's recorded really well, that's your first thing. Your first thing is, all right, I'm gonna dip some things out of the way now to make room for other instruments. But when things are not, like the piano isn't full bodied and it doesn't have the right sustain, you can see the waveform. Like you can tend to see these things even before starting to process. Like the tail, the low end of the piano in the rough mix is like limited with an L2 doing 10 dB of reduction. And you're like, where did the piano sustain go? It's like, that was big because of the limiter that was on when the producer was recording the MIDI piano that doesn't have the sustain. Well, how do we do that? Well, maybe we boost 200 hertz really loud into a limiter. Because remember, think about, well, this is something I learned when I was 16 or 17 in my first internship. The way a dynamic processor like a compressor or a limiter reacts changes based on what frequency is the loudest into that thing, right? So some people used to, 700 hertz in a vocal is pretty annoying. But some people used to make a compressor like an 1176 react to 700 hertz to compress that area more to create density and then cut it out after compression, right? That's why the channel in and out button exists on an SSL console, for example. And it's also on the plugin for you guys that don't know what the channel in and out means when you see that, because a lot of people probably don't. It puts the EQ pre or post the compressor because you change the way a compressor activates based on frequencies. So when I'm taking this to another level outside the console, which is, well, I want to boost or round out that low end of the bass or the low mids of the piano, but I don't want that frequency to be so prominent in it necessarily. I'm just noticing that's where the harmonics are. They're going to cause the full sound to be there first. And then we can mix after that. So if you were to hire the best recording engineer, let's just say you wanted to record a grand piano, I'd probably hire Von Merrick or my homie Noah Schneider. That's just like, that's what they do. Like they record instruments and they do it and they'll dial that in for you. But those of us that are not at that level of recording, we're always kind of seeking out that level of recording. And there are ways to do that in the mix. And that's what we're talking about here. But we can do that on vocals. For example, I could talk about this. This question might take like the whole episode.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's a great question. It's getting into it. And I have a lot of versions of this too.
It gets me thinking about like what I do on a daily basis. And I tend to not get technical on these conversations, but there are things that I'm working on for this purpose, which is it's not necessarily fixing anymore, because it's actually like how to bring out like the supernatural feeling of instruments, right? Like we don't really hear records that just sound like the instrument anymore. It's like a blown out, bigger version of what it is. We haven't had that since like the 70s, where it just sounds like exactly what it is, right? Yeah. I call this like supernatural acoustic instruments, just larger than life sounding things. And so, for example, on a vocal, if it's recorded well enough and not on a C800, you can do this more easily. But again, with the Spectre limiter method that I'm working on, I'll take high end and I'll boost a lot of high end with a Spectre into a limiter. And that's how you get that pop vocal, like top end density, where it feels non-dynamic and compressed top, but you can control it more if there's room for you to add. So just think about boosting into limiters or into saturators or into de-essers, into compressors, into dynamic processors. And that's how you create sustained density. You could take it too far, obviously. That could really be brittle. If your monitoring isn't great, you might go too far. These are definitely like more advanced techniques that you have to be more confident in the approach to. I wouldn't just boost 10 dB of 10K into a limiter. It's probably too much.
Well, try it. Fuck it.
But try it. That's what I mean. Like, try it, but be mindful that, like, if this is your first time, I would go too far and pull back by a split the difference, maybe the first couple of times you're doing it. But it's been working for me. It's been getting good reactions to especially in music that people want to be dense. On this podcast, I like dynamics. I like a little bit of push and pull. But this is a way that I kind of get the best of both worlds and do it on anything.
You know, and it's, you talk about it as sustain, but it's important to remember also that sustain doesn't necessarily mean a super, super long sustain. It can even be in something like a snare drum. You know, one of the old Eric Valentine tricks for getting the excitement out of a live snare drum, no samples at all, is splitting the signal or taking one of two live snare drum mics and taking one of these old Orban EQs, I think it's called Orban, and you boost like crazy 200 hertz, where sort of the body of the snare drum, you find exactly where it is, but it distorts like crazy through that box, and the distortion with that low end going through it adds all this density and sustain, even though it's very short because it's just a snare drum, but it adds this huge weight to his snare drum. If you go listen to the Good Charlotte records like The Anthem or Lifestyles, The Rich and Famous, or Gives You Hell, some of those records.
That's what I learned.
The weight in those snare drums comes from boosting the body frequencies of the snare drum into a saturator, essentially. It's all in one box.
That's how you get that clipped sustain thing that like all splice samples have, right? We're basically like, Eric is a true genius in this sense, because he was doing these things that were changing the sound of rock and pop music, definitely for the better. They were made, like, this is what I talk about, like larger than life, supernatural sounding things. It's like, that's not what a snare drum sounded like. But because of it, and we were at that same time, there were hip hop records coming out through an MPC that you were like turning up the saturation on and getting this. Well,
and through tape machines and through vinyl and then through MPC and layers and layers of saturation.
So the length, this is a great example, because the length of drums started getting longer and longer, and it became known as a fatter sounding thing. So rock records also had to compete that way, and he was doing that. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And instead of having to split out things, now we have plugins that have wet and dry knobs on them, right? So, there's still phasing involved. This is something you always have to check. Like, I bet Eric, when he did that move, flipped the phase on his console on that channel to check which way was better.
And nudging in Pro Tools too.
And nudging in Pro Tools. Like, these are the tricks of the, that we had to do back then that we don't have to do as much anymore. Because now we can do things with one plug-in. You put your CLA vocal on the snare, I bet it's going to do something. But I think that the desire for larger than life sounds, what I keep coming back to, you got to do these types of things. Like, you have to be exaggerating. The sounds sound exaggerated, and that takes confidence. To do that, it takes trial and error. It takes someone being like, yo, that sounds crazy, but that snare's way too loud. And you're like, oh fuck, I never turned down the parallel distorted 200. It's like plus 12 because I was checking to see what it was doing. You're like, oh man, but that sounds crazy. That's how you get these sounds. You gotta fuck up.
And you got to go too far. You got to go extreme. It was something you said on an earlier live, and you alluded to it earlier. It's actually really great when you're pulling up sounds for the first time. If you're mixing, or even if you're it's your own production, you're listening the next day and you want to figure out what's there. Going extreme with a limiter or a compressor, or saturator, just to see where all the little breaths and the nuance and the subtleties are. Not that you're going to end up there, although occasionally you do, but if you have a vocal or have a live bass sound, smash it through a saturator or a limiter or something and see what that feels like, and listen to all the subtleties and all the breaths and see where they are, and then dial it back and do clip gain and do whatever else you're doing. But almost going from a sound design perspective, exactly. It's a slower process, but that's where you really find what's underneath all of the sounds you're getting. It's a really important thing.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm doing things opposite that I would have probably spoke about on this when we first started, right? Which is, I'm actually clamping down hard on a limiter to find the performance, not only in vocals, but we can just talk about vocals, then clip gaining based on how hard the limiter is hitting. Like S has got to come down a lot. Sometimes there's plosives now that I'm hearing that weren't there. Like the clip gain is being done into the limiter because that's how I'm feeling. Like, all that character that's coming out, I might be boosting into it. If there's too much C800 top end, I'm actually reducing the top end into it and then boosting after, right? Like it's a combination of pre and post dynamic control. That's really how you get things to be, as some people will put, like up against the glass, where everything feels like really forward. And I mean, Skrillex was one of the first people to really do that in the modern age of electronic music, and that goes all the way to pop music that's electronic based. And how do we get things up against the glass? Then now we have acoustic instruments coming back into style in records. Thank fucking God we got some of that going on, and everything's not so sterile anymore. And we also want that same feeling, and that's what I'm looking for. Is like, how do we get things, and a lot of that boosting into dynamics, you're going to have to EQ after. You're going to have to, take a spectral shaper and chill out some harsh top or high mids after these things. And as you take out high mids, remember the low mids are then going to come up and be more, because as you reduce somewhere, it's a constant push and pull. But it's been working really well for when you get things to be perceived loud and not have to be, and still maintain dynamics. It's also really fun. It's like a fucking puzzle. Like, that's the thing. Let's try it again.
And I'm not recommending, I am not recommending, nor am I not. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that these are right for everybody. I don't know that these techniques are right for everybody, because they're actually these are very advanced things we're talking about, and they're things that I've spent a lot of time playing with. And sometimes the results are just weird, and there's too much phasing, and I just undo all of it. Even when I'm like, this should work, why isn't this? And then I listen back the next day, and this sounds way too processed and doesn't sound right, and I undo all of it. So these are intense things, because, like you said, the more you start manipulating extra saturation and mix knobs on plugins, you're dealing with phase things, and you're going to lose dynamics, and there are things to be very careful with. One of the things that I did on a song demo recently, I was working on a lyric with an artist. We're basically just finishing the song, and so getting a new vocal together, and she sang just in like a home USB mic, just like a quick demo, but she sang and it was a not a very high quality mic, maybe $100 USB mic or something. So it was very challenging to get the mix right on it to sound as good as the original version, which was done on a nice mic, but I think this version of the song is better. But she sang it on such a shitty thing. I had to make it competitively bright, but the high end on those cheap mics are so bad by comparison.
So brittle.
So it was a lot of like using Spectre and then using multi-band de-essing stuff. And I got the Weiss de-esser, and I was playing with that, and I was trying to do. And then what I realized at a certain point is that I really needed to split up each section of the song and treat all the vocals differently, which I try generally not to do for this reason, where once you start going deep and dividing a vocal performance into all these different ways of processing it, you can very quickly lose the feeling of the vocal, and it just sounds disjointed to the listener, because all of a sudden, like, the vocal just sounds different, and you don't want it to. It's supposed to sound like a singer-songwriter. But I ended up having to do that.
Well, when I do that, because it's not an all the time thing, but when I have to do that, I then tend to send maybe it's 3 to 6 tracks to a bus, and do some sort of re-gluing together on that.
That's where I put the Weiss de-esser at the end, and that's the thing that helped kind of glue it all together at the end.
Yeah, so that can help like reshape the tone. The Goodhertz tone control plugin has been a good friend to me recently with matching overall shapes. It's basically like a tilt thing. They also have a tilt. It's a little different. This has a little bit more control over it. You can kind of my preset that I have starts with 5K and up, and I take that down 2 dB, and then at 200 hertz and up, and I put that up 2 dB, and it kind of like rounds out the vocal to give me a better starting place. And then I'm A-Bing with the rough to make sure I don't lose like the top end energy that people want. Otherwise, I just go in overconfidently and just say I'm going to make this vocal sound good and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But a lot of this stuff, I've been, we talk about science a lot. Like I'm running experiments, and then, I'll mention it here, right? Or I'll call Dale, my mastering engineer, be like, hey, have you noticed anything different in like this area? And we'll talk about it, and he'll be like, why? And I'll say, oh, well, I've been doing this. How is it translating to the master? He's like, oh, I actually didn't even think about it. But yeah, I'm doing less in this area now. I'm doing less here. Like I'm constantly like under the radar doing, I guess in science, it would be like replication. Like, can this experiment be replicable, over and over on many instruments, on many, are these studies working out constantly? And, then I bring them here, and I love the opportunity to do that. Like we don't really talk about these things, but it's also because I'm not always ready to talk about them confidently too. Like,
I love you talking about them, and I love talking about them with you, because this is the process that I think is important for people to see, which is we're trying new stuff all the time. And I think that's what makes us work at the level we work at, is really like, there's this new thing. I think it's great. I think it's the greatest thing. And then a week later, you're like, it's okay. I use it for some stuff, but I couldn't, the replicable aspect, I couldn't make this work on as many things as I thought. It was right for this. It's another, arrow in the quiver or whatever. It's another tool that I can use, but I'm not going to use it all the time, but I kind of know what it does now. But then I talk to you about it, and you go, well, I've done it like this and this. And then I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to try that next. These are all, it's an evolving process. And especially, the thing that I think maybe younger people are just used to, but older people, and it's a sliding scale, are not as used to, is things are moving so quickly, and technology is changing so quickly that even things that we talked about 18 months ago when we started this might not apply in the same way now, because there's new tools. I mean, it's one of the things that for a very long time, for literally like the first 10 or 15 years that I was making records and around people that where I was like an assistant and making stuff on my own, that it was pretty much the consensus that there's nothing that sounds like tube or tape in a computer. That's one of the things that computers just can't do yet. And now they kind of can. So there's really, and anybody who's under the age of 25 probably just is like, why would anybody ever use a tape machine? But for a while there were a lot of producers that were like, the computer's great, we use Pro Tools, but we will run things off tape because you can't really replicate that. Now, there's still people who do stuff like that because there's particular tape machines they like, or just the aesthetic of it, sort of the reason to use outboard, like an analog synth versus you can get the same sound on the computer. There's something nice about running something through a physical box, that just the aesthetic of that is nice. But in terms of just getting good harmonic saturation, there are so many great tools now. And a lot of the things we talk about might change in 6 months. And I'm always interested in talking to people like you and seeing what people are doing, because it changes. It changes like week to week sometimes. Like you were talking about the Goodhertz stuff. The Goodhertz stuff is so good, and I keep using it more and more, and it's like there's something really great. And Spectre was like a complete game changer for me. Like
it all feels
in the last
like
6 months to me.
It all feels like I've talked about this on previous episodes, and I've talked about it a lot, but it just makes me want to repeat it a little bit. Like when you talk about saturation and outboard gear, and you take the visual, the GUI of plugins, and you're like, you think you're using an 1176 from UAD, and we talk about how the
graphics are good.
The graphics are good. You're not using an 1176.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you're not using a compressor that can get the job done for you on that thing. but it's not what you're actually using. I think that's why I'm so turned on by GoodHertz plugin, is like when I use their tube tape thing, the tube, I'm not seeing the tape machine, like the ATR spinning, like, do you want to open it and use more CPU to see the tape spin? Like, no, I don't want, it's not, and that ATR does not sound like the ATR that I just mastered a record on with Dale Becker. It doesn't sound anything like that. So you might like that plugin. That's fine. That is not an ATR. Like, that's not what it actually sounds like. Doesn't mean you can't use the plugin. The tape slap on that thing is tight. The saturation can be tight. I haven't used it in like 3 years, but it can be tight. But that's not what you're using. So use your ears. There are great plugin saturators out there, and I prefer the ones that have a knob, that don't look like they're emulating something. I'm sure they're modeled after something. Every algorithm is modeled after something else. There's no algorithm that's that proprietary at this point. Like, there's always something that was before it that this is trying to do better, more efficiently for the computer. Same thing with gear. Find your way of creating the most special and abundant harmonics possible to create music that can elicit some sort of an emotional response, whatever it takes to do that. And
abundant harmonics.
And start by writing a great fucking lyric. Because my favorite songs I've mixed in the last 2 weeks, I've done so many songs in the last 2 weeks, they're about the lyric that I can connect to. Those are my favorite. I don't know sonically if they beat the ones that I didn't connect to as much. Doesn't matter. They're my best work. And every mixer, every producer, every writer, every artist, no matter what they say, I bet gives their best work when they're committed fully to that song.
Well, it's something that Peter Asher said when I talked to him a few weeks ago, what makes a great manager, and he said a great artist, like a great client. Like, he's like, it's no surprise that he's like, I think he said he inducted them in the something Hall of Fame. He's like, the first two managers in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are, the manager of the Beatles and the manager of the Rolling Stones. Like, that's how you become a great manager, is have a great artist. How do you get the best mix? How do you get the best production? The best song, the best lyric, the best performance. I mean, we can talk about harmonic saturators all day, but if the song ain't good, you don't have a lot of room to saturate greatness.
No, you don't.
Let's see if we can grab a couple other questions. That was a great one from Avant.
That was fun. It was a fun rant. I really like that question.
And we could jump into that. Might be a fun one to just touch on every week.
We didn't really answer the question. The answer to the question is all of them.
Yeah, what's the most challenging instrument to mix in a song?
Every instrument dependent.
Yeah, it depends on the recording. Depends on a lot of things. I mean, and we were just saying, for me, I guess for both of us, live bass has been the challenge recently. But
anything with frequencies that are all over the place, like a poorly recorded grand piano in a big room, that the room reflections are causing the sustain of notes, and someone's not playing with the pedal properly because they're not that good. Like, they're a songwriter that's good enough at piano, but they're not really articulate in the way they're expressing themselves with the sustain pedal, and you have notes bleeding over. On a live bass, sometimes you have harmonics from the non-muted note from before, right? Depending on how good the bass player is. Like, there's a lot that causes something to be harder than another instrument, and it tends to be the performance. So that's the actual answer to the question.
The things that are the hardest to mix are the things that are the worst recorded.
Yes.
And whether that's performance, whether that's the performance or the actual recording. Because I was saying, this song demo that I was working on last couple of days, and this is literally like a quick Ableton pitched acoustic guitar, like nylon string guitar, and one vocal. And I probably spent 5 hours on the vocal, and it's literally just to rewrite a lyric and get the management, the A&R, to sign off and be excited. And now we're going to go into actual production. But it was, and she sang it great. It was just on a bad mic, and she's 18 and was just like, just record it at home. It's fine. We went back and forth a few times, but because it was I assume a sub $100 USB mic, trying to get it competitively present was incredibly hard.
Also, at that point, you want to lean into, maybe the shittiness of it, like
the lo-fi. Yep.
We talked about that with my Lady Gaga story with Tony. Like, the shit was recorded terribly on that Marry the Night record. And instead of trying to make it competitively present, we just distorted it even more and just leaned into what it was. And that shit sounds crazy. Yeah. Because you got to just embrace what's there. If someone starts saying like, hey, why doesn't it sound like Casey Musgraves? And you're like, well, I don't know. Casey's vocal was recorded really well and there's beautiful top end and the engineering on that stuff is a little bit better than what you presented us. But at least have that conversation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened is I went too far with it. I was like, I'm going to make this competitively bright, but every S, every T, every K was just like so harsh and awful. And I tried to go in with Spectre, and I tried to go in with a few de-essers and some other saturators, and it just
that sounds like you gotta take all of those things onto another track and then EQ that track differently. Like you have to almost RX like a distorted, like the RX distortion thing, like D-clip, I think. Like you want to like D-clip the S's separately on another track and then conform them back in if you want to, or just put them to a bus, like, or use the Option 6 function in Pro Tools and just like batch process a filter. I
know, I was trying to do it in Ableton too.
You know, in Ableton, that's near impossible.
much harder. No Option 6. I actually thought about it 3 times. Like, I'll just
But there's a bigger thing here, which is there's really no easy way to remedy what you're talking about, and what you're talking about happens all the time.
You can't.
So there's no shortcut
there. Yeah.
There's never going to be a shortcut or a magic plugin that sorts out what you're talking about, that makes something professional and competitive and standing the test of time and emotionally compelling and all the things that we're looking for when we're making a record.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's see. Man, this is another one which we could go on. Oh, we've talked about it a bit. Bobby asked, would you recommend your career to other people? Which is, you know, we could make that a short answer, a long answer. We have talked about it before. There's one of our clips that I think has got the most traction on Instagram, hit the algorithm somehow, was something along the lines of, you know, a career in music is a terrible idea or something like that. Because I think by and large, I think I would not recommend my career to almost anyone except for the very few people that can't seem to do something else and have to do this thing all the time and spend all their free time doing it. You know, we talk a lot about, especially early in people's career, how much time that it takes for basically all of the successful people we know had a period early on in their career where they just spent an absurd amount of time making music all the time, working in a studio, doing projects on their own, and sacrificing a lot of normalcy and arresting their development. So it's like you don't really get to go be an adult human because you're 25 in a recording studio at all hours. Like you can't really have sustainable relationships. You're not building a life into adulthood. I don't recommend that for people, but the people that are going to do it anyway, that's kind of a large part of, I think, who we're talking to on these things, where if you found yourself, I wouldn't say you have to do that. In fact, I would say it's probably not a good thing for your lifestyle. But if you find yourself doing that and obsessively making music all the time, then we can talk about how to learn about balance and how to learn about techniques and how to keep your mental health going and all that. But I don't think I would recommend this to most people. In fact, I've said that to most people. When people say, how do you become a record producer? I say, do you have a laptop? And they go, yeah. And I go, start making records tonight and then do it for 10 years and then you can make money doing it. Like that's literally what it is. Like if you want one of these careers, you have the technology, you have the ability, go start doing it now and you'll make no money for a long time. And you got to love that process. And that's I don't know. That's my short response.
No, I love that answer. I'll just say I agree with everything you said, and then I'll come at it from a slightly different angle, which is as a mixer. If I were to recommend this career path, I would ask more questions. I would ask people, are they okay with not being in the limelight? Do you like reaching under the hood and learning about how things are made and really understanding how sounds are created? And not always getting to make them sound like you wish that they could, because that's not always what people want. But
you're working for other people.
You're working for other people, but you need a deep, rich understanding about source material and what makes up a great arrangement and sonic experience. Do you like staring at a computer screen or do you mind it? Are you good at controlling your distractions? Because it takes a lot of focus.
Yeah.
And are you willing to sacrifice social activity? At least for the first probably 10 to 15 years, like you mentioned. I think that tapers off. I'm doing more like, dinners with my girlfriend and doing other things that like I would not have done 10 years ago. Like I went to a show the other night. Like, I do other things, but I didn't for most of my career. So more time in my career than not, I didn't do those things.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing them, a decent amount of time because I have a stable, input of work. That's I'm very grateful and thankful for.
I think, yeah, and that's a very good point. And somebody actually asked, let me grab this other question because we can touch on it as well. Jordan asked if you could give your younger self advice about routine and balance, what would it be? I think that the reality is when you're starting out, you are working for other people, and you cannot set your own schedule. And we've talked about times in both of our careers. Certainly, I've talked about it in mine, where the times where I was working on a project and I was working so much on it that I wasn't able to do stuff on my own and enjoy music the way I did when I was a teenager. And I kind of stopped listening to music because I was just only using my ears and my brain power on recording distorted guitar for weeks and weeks. And I was like losing my love for music. It was a very weird time. And everybody's going to go through that has this kind of career. Everybody's going to go through some version of that because for the most part, you are going to have to be working not just on someone else's project. I love the collaboration process. I love helping someone else achieve their vision, but I'm still in charge of my schedule for the most part. I pick jobs, that sort of thing. I'm in a luxurious position now in my career where I can decide what I want to work on for the most part. But when you're starting out, it's like, if you're going to get that internship at the studio, you got to figure out how to eat, and you're going to be there all the time. And everybody wants that job who's straight out of school or who's 18 or whatever it is. And you have to really love that process and love the being involved in a very small role and filling that role for what's going to be a long period. So I don't recommend that to people. But yeah, you have to really want to do it. I mean,
Tony said that to me. He's like, "Why do you want to be a mix engineer? Like, it's not even going to be a thing in 10 years or whatever." And I was like, "Because I want to." And he's like, "Well, you sure? You sure you want to fucking do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to fucking do this." He's like, "Then you're in. Let's go." But like that's a very short version of what happened. But like it was an ongoing. Like, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is rugged shit, man. Like, people are gonna, do whatever they want to you. And it's like that's not been my experience. Like, I think times have changed, and people seem to be like, a bit more open to what the mix engineer brings to the table than I think in the past. Producers are always going to be, a step below the star and then a step above the mixer. But, the mix engineer is to me, feels more collaborative and experiential now. And like people want to know who you are and what you're doing. And it's not just like a send off and get back thing as much as I had experienced at that time. And, I got asked by a producer the other day, like, "Hey, do you, what's your typical process? Do you like to have a conversation before you mix? Do you like to just dive in?" And I was like, "I'd love to have a conversation about what you're going for." That just doesn't happen a lot because people are busy. But it would be great. Like, hope, attended sessions are starting to happen where people want to come by and do notes. Like, that stuff's cool. I still have to be careful. There's still a COVID happening, but I think it's cool that people are even asking. We're doing live streams, like right after I get off in 5 minutes, I got to jump on a stream and finish up a thing. That seems more collaborative. So I think you have to really want to do it. You have to like collaboration. You have to dissolve your ego as much as possible while maintaining confidence that you know what you're doing and people are coming to you for a reason. They're either bringing you in to repair shit and make it tight, or just say it's tight and get it across the line and deliver it. There's two modes. There's really no in between, and it's for you to discern which one is which with what client, what their expectations are, and meet them as often as possible. You'll never meet them 100% of the time.
Yep. All right, we got 5 minutes left. Let me see. There's a couple little things. Let me just run through a few. John asks, which new MacBook Pro should you get as a producer? I don't exactly know the answer to that. I mean, I have a maxed out new, not an
one
M1.
that works.
Yeah.
Anyone?
I think there are better options than the laptop if you are not going to be mobile. If you're going to be mobile, it kind of has to be a laptop. There's some good discussion on the Discord, another plug for the Discord server, about the M1 chip and if everything is compatible yet. So I would do some internet research on that to figure out if the new Apple chips are the best thing for what you're doing. I know there's a lot of people that use PCs and FL Studio. That's a whole nother kind of producer vibe. But yeah, I don't know the answer. It depends on what your needs are. If you're mobile, you got to get a laptop. But yeah, the Mac Minis, there's people using, truthfully, like, I think if you have one of the new Macs and you have it pretty maxed out, them shits work fast and they work
and
great.
You maintain it and keep your stuff updated properly.
Yeah.
Keep it clean. Don't overload your hard drive. Like there's maintenance that has to be done.
Dimitar asked, what do you use to pitch? Because I know you talk about dropping bass an octave. I have lots of thoughts on this.
Polyphonic mode in Pro Tools and clear out the
Elastic Audio.
Elastic Audio, clear out the analysis markers except for where you need them, because then you'll get that double.
Yep.
That's a huge thing. You gotta
the warp markers analysis. Yeah, when you go to analysis mode, it puts all these things up. Wipe all that.
Hate hearing that in vocals. Like I could tell exactly what it is. Yep. It's just all over the place. Just delete your analysis markers.
Yep. Elastic Audio. Delete the analysis markers. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's all. I mean, that's all I use them in Pro Tools. When I was in producing mode, I would use Ableton. I thought Ableton was great.
Ableton is fantastic for that stuff because you can switch between the modes so easily. Complex Pro using the Beats mode.
Yeah.
There's interesting things that happen. And there's also, again, on the Discord, some great discussion about Ableton's algorithms and how they affect the sonic quality, because there's some degradation if you have those modes on and are not actually doing any pitching. So you don't want to necessarily you
default to that.
You want it to not be on warp mode unless you are warping, because you will get artifacts. One of the reasons, as we've talked about before, that people think Ableton sounds worse than the rest of them is because a lot of times you're getting degradation from things being in warp mode, even if you're not warping them. It does some degradation. See, 2 minutes left. Anna asked 2 questions. Asked about the Grace design. You use the Grace stuff, right? The DAC. Mm-hmm. Which is is there a particular model? The
M905 is my monitor controller. I use the Hilo in and out, and I monitor out through the for my mix bus conversion, and then I monitor out through the Graces because of its connectivity. I think it sounds great. Some people think that it has a sound. I can't, and that's a good or a bad thing. I like it. I'm getting mixes across the line. For me, it's about the control. I have my rough mix and my main mix through parallel AES buttons, so I can hit one button and it goes between the rough, and so that's really cool for my workflow. I have an Apple TV that people can stream music from the couch. It hooks up there. I have my main output. I have my computer going to it, and I have a B-rig like XLR in the back on the couch under a rug, just in case people want to plug in and send me files or hear their stuff through speakers. Like the connectivity and the remote is very, very functional for my workflow. It's very, very fast.
Nice. Well, that's about an hour. I know you got a stream to jump to.
Yeah.
We got through
that's great.
About half the questions. Yeah, and I think there's some more to explore on some of these too. I like Avaya's question about challenging instruments. I think it'd be cool to talk about maybe next time we're on, talk about some specific challenges we found during the week, especially now that I'm back in the mode. I'm just nonstop in this shit. Great to see you, John. Love you.
You too. Love you too.
I'm gonna go jump on the Discord after and say what's up to folks.
Later, guys.
Peace.